All right, let's finish up this extended look at logical proofs with the fourth kind of argument here with the logos signs. Okay? Signs are, as you can tell from and remember from driver's ed class, signs that point to something else. These are facts, events that accompany some other state of affairs that might be important in themselves, but also, more importantly, usually say something else is going on. Notice this, but then look over here too, right? Just as stop sign says doesn't exist by itself. It exists because stop, look at this, do this action. There's some other state of affairs. There are other traffic, other cars moving in a different direction. Stop and be aware of them. These stop signs, traffic signs don't exist just all by themselves, right? Unless you're in some sort of restaurant like Cracker Barrel or something like that. But mostly signs just exist to point to something else, right? Popular saying, sort of like a maxim, right? When there's smoke, there's fire, right? The smoke exists, but the smoke is telling you and warning you, oh, it's not just smoke, but there's also fire. We have to do something about this, maybe try to put it out or escape or something like that, right? You get a fever, you're sick. It's not just, oh man, I've got a fever, so I'll do what I can to get rid of this fever. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we just, take some medicine to try to stifle the symptoms, but oftentimes the fever is there because it's pointing to there's something else going on wrong with you that maybe you need to just rest or take the weekend off, maybe not eat so much for a while, just drink orange juice or water or something, saltines and 7-Up or whatever it is, or maybe Sprite if you prefer. But take it easy. You got more than just a fever going on. So if you can try to suppress the fever so you feel better, sure, but you got to understand that there's something else going on. The fever is a sign of illness, right? You get a scar, it's a sign that it's not just a scar, but there's an injury, perhaps deeper or whatever it might be, or just a memory of some other injury that happened. So these signs are pointing to other things as well. And so whether it's physical or intellectual, signs can be useful in certain ways, right? Certainly want to be aware of the old notion of the Tecmerion, the infallible sign. Are there signs that are always true? Maybe, but not necessarily, right? The detectives go through the apartment to find a bloody shirt. It's like, yes, you must be the murderer. But maybe it's just, oh, well, he was in a fight the other day and he had a broken nose or got lots of nosebleeds, and so that shirt, maybe it's his own blood and not any victim's blood. That got kind of gruesome there. Sorry about that. But, there are always signs that seem perhaps, well, that is obvious. It's got to mean this, but there might not be such thing as the infallible sign. You have to understand the context of something and you have to explain it, right? So don't always depend upon, if I mention this sign, my audience will always understand this is what I mean, right? Signs work because they appeal to the common experiences that we all share. And so, culturally, kairotically, that this is something that is current or useful to this time, this place, and this people, right? And so your job with signs is to convince your audience that this sign that I'm referring to proves what I'm trying to say. So you can't just mention the sign or use it. You have to explain it, right? And certainly you would do that for all sorts of your, all of your logical proofs or emotional proofs or, character proofs or whatever. You don't just say them and walk away. You would certainly give them context, and that's important for signs especially, right? Or statistical data and extrinsic proofs, right? You want to give your audience some sort of context and understanding, right? So Quintilian, our buddy that we've been referring to for most of these slides here, says you should have other support, and I agree with him that signs by themselves don't quite prove exactly your point as strongly as you might want it to, right? Because as we said, there's always multiple ways to interpret things, right? There's a dark sky out there. Does that mean it's a sign that there's a coming storm? Perhaps, but maybe it's just a sign that there's heavy pollution and we need to, instead of just being afraid of the weather and change our plans, maybe we need to change the kinds of cars we're using, or whether we are recycling enough or something like that, right? So signs may have a common background and common experience, but you have to explain just to make sure that your audience knows, yes, this is what you mean, right? Because as we said, there's a kairotic element to them, right? Signs can change over time. Long time ago, family owning Atari, that was a sign of, wow, you are super wealthy. You've got a brand new Atari. That must be super fun. Can I come over to your house and play? Right? As a few years pass, maybe a decade or so passes, the sign of owning Atari means, oh, you still have an Atari? What are you, poor? What, you don't have a Super Nintendo yet? Like, what's wrong with you? Right? A few more years pass. Wow, you still have an Atari? Wow, that's neat. That's great. Can we play it? Wow, look how bad these graphics are. Owning an Atari is a sign of different things over time. Having a guy having long hair several decades ago meant something different from what it means today, right? It's a cultural issue that has changed its meaning over time. So the sign of, having long hair or guys with earrings, things aren't quite what they are today that they were some decades ago, right? Signs mean different things over time. So you can't just say, here's a sign. You got to explain it, make sure you know that it proves what you really want it to prove, right? Sometimes they differ by region or by culture, right? Some parts of the world, asking strangers about their heritage is considered rude, not just, showing interest in new people that you've met, right? So you have to be aware of what are the regional issues, what are the cultural things that, signs and experiences, behaviors might mean different things in different places, right? Sometimes signs are so obscure, like crop designs, that you don't know what they mean, right? Does it mean they're aliens? Does it mean that farmers are just trying to get attention? Who knows what it might mean? So it's your job then when you use signs to really explain, this is why I'm pointing them out, this is what I want them to mean, so you, audience, can understand what this sign actually represents. Okay. So 4 kinds of logical proofs there: the enthymeme, the example, the maxim, and signs. Okay. So what are we going to do with them? As you'll see from the homework, now that we've got these different videos uploaded as materials, and you can tell the difference between materials and assignments a lot easier now. Here is your basic activity for Tuesday's class, for next Tuesday. Make sure you upload it before your next Tuesday's class. Okay. Logos activity. So the first step really is to start narrowing down what is it you really want to write about for your senior thesis. Okay, we did the 5 kairotic issues a few weeks ago. Now you worked with at least perhaps one of them for your stasis theory commonplace worksheet, and then now narrow that 5 down to 3. And these 3 thesis ideas that you should write down first on this paper. Just type out a sheet of paper here. Step 1. Write down 3 thesis ideas that you find interesting, that you think, all right, I would be willing to research about this for several months, think about this, write about this for several months. Okay, that is the first step. Pick 3 thesis ideas that may work for you as a final thesis idea, right? You're not committing to it just yet, but these, make it useful, beneficial for you right now. Pick 3 things. All right, I could see myself caring about, being interested in, trying to get other people to care about any of these 3 ideas. Okay, so write those down, 3 sentences. Make sure you write it as a statement, not as a question. Don't say, should Christian students dance? Or, don't ask me questions. Tell me how it is, right? Christians should not have a problem with, dancing, something like that. State it as a perspective with your side of the issue overtly clear, right? So step 1, write down 3 thesis ideas that you really care about. Then pick one of them, maybe put a star next to it or something, and then try to prove that one of those 3 using these 4 logical appeals. Right? Write an enthymeme, right? State 3 or 4 premises, lay them together as a string of logical arguments, right? So you've got 3 sentences there for part 1, an enthymeme, 3, maybe 4 more sentences right there. Leave a space. Feel free to make these sort of like bulleted points, right? Just like there is in the slideshow, right? Bullet, enthymeme, 3 or 4 logical statements strung together, right? Capital letters, punctuation marks, all that, the usual good stuff, right? Then leave a space. Give me an example, historical example, fictional example. Give me an example of whatever this thing is you're trying to prove, right? From history, right? Whatever your thesis might be, right? And, informational, practical, theoretical, whatever it is. And give me a historical example, a fictional example of why this thesis is true, right? Something that a logical reason why this example proves what you're trying to say in your thesis. Then give me a sign, right? Where there's some sort of state of affairs, like an example, maybe some statistical data, something you shouldn't have to do a whole lot of research for, but what is some accompanying sign that shows why your thesis is true? What is it in the culture or the community or the collective awareness of the audience, what sort of sign that goes along with it, right? What is a sign of, say, abortion is murder? What is a sign that proves abortion is murder? The origin of human life, or when life begins at conception, or something like that. What is a sign that proves that this is the case? Right? So logical arguments with an enthymeme, an example from history or fiction that sort of fairly well known, a sign that proves this state of affairs is true, and then a maxim. Now, you could, if it helps to, look up famous quotations and online, that's fine. You wouldn't normally use research for, a logical proof like that and a maxim, unless but if like a famous saying or a famous line of a song or a famous, saying from a speech or, drama play or something like that, some popular, moral or maxim, Aesop's fable, moral, whatever, some sort of famous line, famous saying that people are that's well known for the people, that, they'll understand what it is that, oh yes, this is some sort of historical, intellectual realm of common experience that proves why this is true, right? And so you wouldn't necessarily need to explain that maxim. You could just write it out. Write that famous saying, write that famous line, that famous verse out, and that would be your maxim. You don't need to explain it. So altogether, we're looking at, maybe 12 sentences here for this. 3 simple statements at the beginning, 3 or 4 sentence enthymeme, perhaps, 2 or 3 sentences for your example, a couple of sentences for your sign, and, 2 sentences for your famous saying and your maxim there. So maybe a dozen, 12, 15 sentences should be fairly straightforward. And again, there'll be something that you can upload, and there'll be more specific reminders there on the assignment tab. So don't upload it to this video, upload it there on the assignment tab sometime between or whenever you watch this, hopefully before it's due, and then upload it here before next Tuesday. Okay, so that was our look at intrinsic proof number 1, the appeals to logic. Very helpful, very familiar, things you've been using over the years, so hopefully nothing too difficult there for you. Again, this year will start to continue to get easier as we get more familiar with these ideas and start putting them into practice. Hopefully that'll get, the process will get easier for you. So, and I could only hope more enjoyable for you. And so that was our look at logical proofs. Next week we will look at appeals to character. We'll talk to you then.